This moved Alec in a gentle, unagonizing way. Betty would never have wanted to be thought one of the important people in the district, but she had been a well-liked queen of her modest bits of castle. Such reflections occupied him for most of the meal, which soon began to acquire some sort of festive air. A couple of stories from Frank about the difficulties of bringing the laundry business up to date contributed little, Alec considered, apart from additional light on the fellow's character. When Bob got going, however, with what he called some unofficial law reports, it had to be admitted that he cheered everybody up. Even Jim had to laugh a few times, and the two Gioberti girls, each clutching a glass of pop, seemed spellbound. While Alec ordered a round of liqueurs, Frank leaned back and lit a cigarette. "Fantastic, really," he said. "Here we are, the lot of us, all having a good time. And 2 hours ago we were all, well, overwhelmed by grief. It just shows you, don't it? I mean, it's natural, see? The church, the graveyard, the pub. Whoever it was thought up how to run funerals knew his job. I reckon the service was real nice, didn't you, Anne?" Annette kept her eyes on the table. "Very nice," she said. "It was a bit, what shall I say, austere? That's the only criticism I got. Of course you don't want to listen to us, we're Romans. We go for a bit of, colour and ritual and ceremony and incense and all that jazz. When you're used to that type of thing, the other stuff's bound to come a bit drab. See what I mean?" "Yes, I do," Alec said. "But you've got to remember that's the way we run things." He paused to pick up 4 of the half-dozen pieces of silver that remained of his £2 notes. "We like our religion to be austere, as you call it. Like I said, it's what you're used to." Alec's voice rose. "And we don't like a lot of dressing up and chanting and bowing and scraping and any tomfoolery of that kind. That's not what we want in this country. We'll do things the British way." "Who's we, Uncle Mac?" "Okay, Anne." "Which means we're not going to take very kindly, necessarily anyway, to any religion that's... and a lot of other things for that matter that aren't... that are foreign. That what you mean?" "Yes, if you want to put it like that." "Well, you want to put it like that anyway, don't you?" "It's all right, Anne, honest. Yeah, the Pope does live in Rome, no getting away from that. There's no end of foreign things in this country when you get down to it, like the wine we just drank, and that cigar you're smoking. And lots of foreign people, too, one sort and another. In fact, I remember in my far distant youth they was always going on at us about that. How anyone could come here and carry on pretty well any way he liked, provided he behaved himself. They used to reckon it was one of the big... It's no use telling old Mac any of that," Bob put in, swivelling his glance round the table. "He thinks the English are foreigners, really, don't you, old chap? And the Welsh and the Irish too, of course. And the Highland Scotch, and he's not too happy about Edinburgh and Glasgow. In fact, unless you come from Peebles, you're a black man as near as damn it, what?" Everybody laughed loudly, including Elizabeth and Sonia. Alec joined in with the rest. He would not have wanted to withdraw anything he had said to Frank. There was far too much of this sentimentality about nowadays, the idea that you had to be twice as nice to Negroes and Jews and Indians and so on, whatever they were like, which the better types among them must surely resent. And he felt that a little opposition from time to time would not do Frank any harm. All the same, Alec realized, he had gone rather far. No need to have got hot under the collar like that. It must have looked... Suddenly overheated, he rubbed his hand across his forehead. He had drunk too much whiskey on an empty stomach, and he ought to have remembered that white wine never agreed with him. The notion of a few minutes in the open air abruptly became irresistible. At the side of the building there was a small walled yard, embellished with a few climbing plants, where people could sit and drink in the summer if they cared to fetch their own orders from the saloon bar. The chairs and tables had been removed, no doubt to protect against his own folly anyone whom the sunshine might have lured into the treacherous autumnal outdoors. Alec perched himself on a low brick wall and was clasping his hands round one knee, pipe in mouth, when he was joined by Annette, who must have followed him more or less straight from the dining-room. She remained standing, a rather dumpy figure without trace of her mother's looks. He took her expression for one of inquiry. "I'm all right," he said. "It was a bit stuffy in there, wasn't it?" I didn't like what you said to Frank just now. I know. I'm sorry, Annette, I didn't think. You knew he was in the army for 6 years and got captured in North Africa. That makes him as British as anyone else as far as I'm concerned. That, and having a naturalized British father and a mother born British, and being born in England himself. And who cares anyway? And you know how many Catholics there are in England? And it was all Catholics here once before they... Annette, I really am sorry. I had no intention of... He's the best husband and father anyone could wish for. Never looks at another woman, even though I know he gets plenty of chances, and then he runs into this kind of muck. He gets it in business all the time. Mr. Who? How do you spell that? Oh. You can tell what they're thinking. That's when they don't come out and say it. I get it too, you see. How long's your husband been over here? It makes me mad. She was always going on about it. Fine liberal she was. But she wouldn't ever have dreamt of... You didn't know her. The way she used to go on about Elizabeth. That's a laugh, isn't it? Elizabeth. That was him. You don't think I'd have been the one who wanted to name... The sunlight suddenly grew more intense, and Alec shaded his eyes with the hand that held the pipe. What? I don't quite... Never mind. She's well developed for her age, I know, but these days a lot of them are, with the diet or whatever it is. She'd never let me alone about it. I'd see her watching the kids, sort of fascinated, and then, when we were by ourselves, she'd say, "She's so big, isn't she?" As if it was nasty or disgusting or something. "She's so big," she'd say, as if I'd done it on purpose to spite her. And then she'd say, "Of course, these Italian girls, they're women at 14, aren't they? Like Jewesses." Her own granddaughter, 3/4 English. I don't think she ever believed Frank isn't a Jew, really, and hadn't taken up being a Catholic as a sort of extra. She never liked him, and she didn't mind showing it either. But, Annette, it was your father who was against Frank, if either of them was. I remember them arguing about it. He said, "You know what Dad's like, up in the air one minute and forgotten all about it the next. It's just his way." No, she was the one. It wasn't like her to come out and say anything, all smiles on the surface and needling away whenever she got the chance. She was the same with Sonia's eyesight, and Chris crying too much, according to her. I often say to myself the only grandchildren she'd really like would be if Charlie and I got together and had some. She gave him a hell of a time, I don't know whether you knew, wanting to know where he was and who he was with all the time. He got away overseas as soon as he could, poor old Charlie. Annette stopped, not looking at Alec, who hugged his knees tighter to prevent them from trembling. "I didn't realize you hated her," he said. "I didn't hate her, Uncle Mac. Been easier if I had, in a way. Oh, she was all right in lots of ways, and she did enjoy a laugh. It was the way she wouldn't ever leave me and my marriage and my kids alone made me mad." At the mention of anger, anger itself returned to her voice, which had softened in the last minute or so. "She liked babysitting when she came to stay because that gave her a chance to snoop around. She kept you on a pretty good string, didn't she, too, all these years? I felt sorry for you. Dad told me about it once, when they'd had one of their rows. He didn't really mind because it gave her a bit of a kick. Mind you, according to him, she let it slip once. She thought early on you were going to ask her to go off with you, but then you never did. Why not?" "It wasn't that sort of love," Alex said. "No, I know the sort. That's the best sort, the sort you don't have to do anything about, or get to know the person, and it was fine for her. The way she used to put on a big tolerant act Sunday mornings when we came back from Mass, when we stayed with them. Tolerant." Alec thought he saw tears of rage and grief in her eyes. He got up and put his arm diffidently round her shoulders. She went on standing in the same position with her weight on both feet, not stiffening or drawing away, but not relaxing against him either. What she had said had affected him chiefly with apprehension that she might lose all self-control. Whether or not her view of her mother was true, or truer than his, he still felt as if he had spent 32 years preparing a gift that had had, and could conceivably have had, no recipient. In return for his trouble he retained, safe against total erosion, Betty's gift to him of a few ideas about what human nature was like, and the last 2 or 3 hours had taught him something of how envy and pride could appreciably distort his judgment of other people. All this amounted to more than a little, without being, of course, anywhere near enough. He dropped his arm to his side. Annette said, We'd better be getting back in. I'm sorry I came out with some of that. I didn't want to hurt your feelings. It was just that we've all been under a great strain. You come back with us, Uncle Mac, and have some supper. There's plenty of stuff in. Frank'll run you home. That's very kind of you, but it's right across London, you know. Doesn't matter. We ought to see more of you. Seems silly not to. It's a pity it's such a long way. Something strange. Something strange happened every day. It might happen during the morning while the two men were taking their readings and observations and the two women busy with the domestic routine. The big faces had come during the morning. Or, as with the little faces and the coloured fires, the strange thing would happen in the afternoon, in the middle of Bruno's maintenance programme and Clovis's transmission to base, Leah's rounds of the garden and Mara's work on her story. The evening was often undisturbed, the night less often. They all understood that ordinary temporal expressions had no meaning for people confined indefinitely, as they were, to a motionless steel sphere hanging in a region of space so empty that the light of the nearest star took some hundreds of years to reach them. The standing orders devised by base, however, recommended that they adopt a 24-hour unit of time, as was the rule on the earth they had not seen for many months. The arrangement suited them well. Their work, recreation, and rest seemed to fall naturally into the periods provided. It was only the prospect of year after year of the same routine, stretching farther into the future than they could see, that was a source of strain. Bruno commented on this to Clovis after a morning spent repairing a fault in the spectrum analyzer they used for investigating and classifying the nearer stars. They were sitting at the main observation port in the lounge, drinking the midday cocktail and waiting for the women to join them. "I'd say we stood up to it extremely well," Clovis said in answer to Bruno. "Perhaps too well." Bruno hunched his fat figure upright. "How do you mean?" "We may be hindering our chances of being relieved." "Base has never said a word about our relief." "Exactly. With 500,000 stations to staff, it'll be a long time before they get round to one like this, where everything runs smoothly. You and I are a perfect team, and you have Leah and I have Mara, and they're all right together, no real conflict at all. Hence no reason for a relief." Mara had heard all this as she laid the table in the alcove. She wondered how Clovis could not know that Bruno wanted to have her instead of Leah, or perhaps as well as Leah. If Clovis did know and was teasing Bruno, then that would be a silly thing to do, because Bruno was not a pleasant man. With his thick neck and pale fat face, he would not be pleasant to be had by, either, quite unlike Clovis, who was no taller, but whose straight, hard body and soft skin were always pleasant. He could not think as well as Bruno, but on the other hand, many of the things Bruno thought were not pleasant. She poured herself a drink and went over to them. Bruno had said something about it being a pity they could not fake their personnel report by inventing a few quarrels, and Clovis had immediately agreed that that was impossible. She kissed him and sat down at his side. "What do you think about the idea of being relieved?" he asked her. "I never think about it." "Quite right," Bruno said, grinning. "You're doing very nicely here. Fairly nicely, anyway." "What are you getting at?" Clovis asked him, with a different kind of grin. "It's not a very complete life, is it, for any of us? I could do with a change, anyway. A different kind of job, something that isn't testing and using and repairing apparatus. We do seem to have a lot of repairing to do, don't we? That analyzer breaks down almost every day, and yet—" His voice tailed off, and he looked out of the port, as if to assure himself that all that lay beyond it was the familiar starscape of points and smudges of light. "And yet what?" Clovis asked, irritably this time. "I was just thinking that we really ought to be thankful for having plenty to do. There's the routine, and the fruits and vegetables to look after, and Mara's story. How's that going, by the way? Won't you read us some of it? This evening, perhaps. Not until it's finished, if you don't mind. Oh, but I do mind. It's part of our duty to entertain one another, and I'm very interested in it, personally. Why? Because you're an interesting girl, bright brown eyes and a healthy, glowing skin. How do you manage it, after all this time in space? And you've more energy than any of us. Mara said nothing. Bruno was good at making remarks there was nothing to say to. "What's it about, this story of yours?" he pursued. "At least you can tell us that." "I have told you. It's about normal life on Earth. Before there were any space stations, lots of different people doing different things. Not this... That's normal life, is it? Different people doing different things? I can't wait to hear what the things are. Who's the hero, Mara? Our dear Clovis?" Mara put her hand on Clovis's shoulder. "No more, please, Bruno. Let's go back to your point about the routine. I couldn't understand why you left out the most important part. The part that keeps us busiest of all." "Ah, the strange happenings." Bruno dipped his head in a characteristic gesture, half laugh, half nervous tremor. "And the hours we spend discussing them. Oh yes, how could I have failed to mention all that?" "If you've got any sense, you'll go on not mentioning it," Clovis snapped. "We're all fed up with the whole business." "You may be, but I'm not. I want to discuss it. So does Mara. Don't you, Mara?" "I do think perhaps it's time we made another attempt to find a pattern," Mara said. This was a case of Bruno not being pleasant, but being right. "Oh, not again!" Clovis bounded up and went over to the drinks table. "Ah, hello, Leah," he said to the tall, thin, blonde woman who had just entered with a tray of cold dishes. "Let me get you a drink. Bruno and Mara are getting philosophical, looking for patterns. What do you think?" "I'll tell you what I think. I think we're doing enough already. I think patterns are Base's job." "We can make it ours, too," Bruno said. "You agree, Leah?" "Of course," Leah said in the deep voice that seemed to Mara to carry so much more firmness and individuality in its tone than any of its owner's words or actions. "Very well. You can stay out of this if you like, Clovis. We start from the fact that what we see and hear need not be illusions, although they may be. At least that they're illusions that any human being might have. They're not special to us, as we know from Base's reports of what happens to other stations." "Correct, Mara. In any event, illusions or not, they are being directed at us by an intelligence and for a purpose." "We don't know that," Mara objected. "They may be natural phenomena, or the byproduct of some intelligent activity not directed at us." "Correct again, but let us reserve these less probable possibilities until later. Now, as a sample, consider the last week's strange happenings. I'll fetch the log so that there can be no dispute." "I wish you'd stop it," Clovis said when Bruno had gone out to the apparatus room. "It's a waste of time." "Time's the only thing we're not short of." "I'm not short of anything," he said, touching her thigh. "Come with me for a little while." "Later." "Leah always goes with Bruno when he asks her." "Oh, yes, but that's my choice," Leah said. "She doesn't want to now. Wait until she wants to." "I don't like waiting." "Waiting can make it better." "Here we are," Bruno said briskly, returning. "Right. Monday. Within a few seconds the sphere became encased in a thick brownish damp substance that tests revealed to be both impermeable and infinitely thick. No action by the staff suggested itself. After 3 hours and 11 minutes the substance disappeared. It's the infinitely thick thing that's interesting. That must have been an illusion, or something would have happened to all the other stations at the same time, not to speak of the stars and planets. A total or partial illusion, then. Agreed?" "Go on." "Tuesday. Metallic object of size comparable to that of the sphere approaching on collision course at 500 kilometers per second. No countermeasures available. Object appeared instantaneously at 35 million kilometers distance and disappeared instantaneously at 1,500 kilometers. What about that?
We've had ones like that before, Leah put in. Only this was the longest time it's taken to approach and the nearest it's come before disappearing.
Incomprehensible or illusion, Myra suggested. Yes, I think that's the best we can do at the moment. Wednesday, a very trivial one not worth discussing. A being apparently constructed entirely of bone approached the main port and made beckoning motions. Whoever's doing this must be running out of ideas. Thursday, all bodies external to the sphere vanished to all instruments simultaneously, reappearing to all instruments simultaneously 2 hours later. That's not a new one either, I seem to remember. Illusion? Good. Friday, beings resembling terrestrial reptiles covered the sphere, fighting ceaselessly and eating portions of one another. Loud rustling and slithering sounds. The sounds, at least, must have been an illusion with no air out there, and I never heard of a reptile that didn't breathe. The same sort of thing applies to yesterday's performance. Human screams of pain and extreme astonishment approaching and receding. No visual or other accompaniment. He paused and looked round at them. Well, any uniformities suggest themselves? No, Clovis said, helping himself to salad, for they sat now at the lunch table. And I defy any human brain to devise any. The whole thing's arbitrary. On the contrary, the very next happening, today's when it comes, might reveal an unmistakable pattern.
The one to concentrate on, Myra said, is the approaching object. Why did it vanish before striking the sphere?
Bruno stared at her. It had to, if it was an illusion.
Not at all. Why couldn't we have had an illusion of the sphere being struck? And supposing it wasn't an illusion? Next time there's an object, perhaps it will strike, Leah said.
Clovis laughed. That's a good one. What would happen if it did, I wonder, and it wasn't an illusion? They all looked at Bruno for an answer. After a moment or two he said, I presume the sphere would shatter, and we'd all be thrown into space. I simply can't imagine what that would be like. We should be never to see one another again, or anybody or anything else, to be nothing more than a senseless lump floating in space forever. The chances of... It would be worth something to be rid of your conversation, Clovis said, amiable again now that Bruno was discomfited. Let's be practical for a change. How long will it take you to run off your analysis this afternoon? There's a lot of stuff to go out to base, and I shan't be able to give you a hand. An hour, perhaps, after I've run the final tests. Why run tests at all? She was lined up perfectly when we finished this morning. Fortunately. Fortunately indeed. One more variable, and we might have found it impossible. Yes, Bruno said abstractedly. Then he got to his feet, so abruptly that the other three started. But we didn't, did we? There wasn't one more variable, was there? It didn't quite happen, you see, the thing we couldn't handle. Nobody spoke. Excuse me, I must be by myself. If Bruno keeps this up, Clovis said to the two women, base will send up a relief sooner than we think. Myra tried to drive the thought of Bruno's strange behavior out of her head when half an hour later she sat down to work on her story. The expression on his face as he left the table had been one she could not name. Excitement, dislike, surprise. That was the nearest, a kind of persistent surprise. Well, he was certain, being Bruno, to set about explaining it at dinner. She wished he were more pleasant, because he did think well. Finally expelling the image of Bruno's face, she began rereading the page of manuscript she had been working on when the screams had interrupted her the previous afternoon. It was part of a difficult scene, one in which a woman met by chance a man who had been having her 10 years earlier, with the complication that she was at the time in the company of the man who was currently having her. The scene was an eating alcove in a large city. "Go away," Volsky said, "or I'll hit you." Norbu smiled in a not pleasant way. What good would that do? Ermy likes me better than she likes you. You are more pleasant, no doubt, but she likes me better. She remembers me having her 10 years ago more clearly than she remembers you having her last night. I am good at thinking, which is better than any amount of being pleasant. She's having her meal with me, Volsky said, pointing to the cold food and drinks in front of them. Aren't you, Ermy? Yes, Ermy, Norbu said. You must choose. If you can't let both of us have you, you must say which of us you like better. Ermy looked from one man to the other. There was so much difference between them that she could hardly begin to choose. The one more pleasant, the other better at thinking, the one slim, the other plump. She decided being pleasant was better. It was more important and more significant, better in every way, that made a real difference. She said, I'll have Volsky. Norbu looked surprised and sorry. I think you're wrong. You might as well go now, Volsky said. Either will be waiting. Yes, Norbu said. He looked extremely sorry now. Ermy felt quite sorry too. Goodbye, Norbu, she said. Myra smiled to herself. It was good, even better than she had remembered. There was no point in being modest inside one's own mind. She must be a real writer, in spite of Bruno's scoffing, or how could she have invented these characters, who were so utterly unlike anybody she knew, and then put them into a situation that was so completely outside her experience. The only thing she was not sure about was whether she might not have overplayed the part about feeling, or dwelt on it at too great length. Perhaps extremely sorry was a little heavy. She replaced it by sorrier than before. Excellent! Now there was just the right touch of restraint in the middle of all the feeling. She decided she could finish off the scene in a few lines. Probably see you at some cocktail hour, Volsky said. She wrote, then looked up with a frown as the buzzer sounded at her door. She crossed her tiny wedge-shaped room. Its rear wall was part of the outer wall of the sphere, but it had no port. Through the lock and found Bruno on the threshold. He was breathing fast, as if he had been hurrying or lifting a heavy weight, and she saw with distaste that there were drops of sweat on his thick skin. He pushed past her and sat down on her bed, his mouth open. "What is it?" she asked, displeased. The afternoon was a private time, unless some other arrangement were made at lunch. "I don't know what it is. I think I must be ill." "Ill? But you can't be. Only people on Earth get ill. Nobody on a station is ever ill. Base told us that. Illness is caused by—" "I don't think I believe some of the things that Base says." "But who can we believe if we don't believe Base?" Bruno evidently did not hear her question. He said, "I had to come to you. Leah's no good for this. Please let me stay with you. I've got so much to say." "It's no use, Bruno. Clovis is the one who has me. I thought you understood that I didn't—" "That's not what I mean," he said impatiently. "Where I need you is in thinking, though that's connected with the other, the having. I don't expect you to see that. I've only just begun to see it myself." Myra could make nothing of this last part. "Thinking? Thinking about what?" He bit his lip and shut his eyes for a moment. "Listen to this," he said. "It was the analyzer that set my mind going. Almost every other day it breaks down, and the computer, the counters, the repellers, the scanners, and the rest of them, they're always breaking down too, and so are their power supplies. But not the purifier, or the fluid reconstitutor, or the fruit and vegetable growers, or the heaters, or the main power source. Why not?" "Well, they're less complicated. How can a fruit grower go wrong? A chemical tank and a water tank is all there is to it. You ask Leah about that." "All right. Try answering this, then. The strange happenings, if they're illusions, why are they always outside the sphere? Why are there never any inside?" "All right. Try answering this, then. The strange happenings, if they're illusions, why are they always outside the sphere? Why are there never any inside?" "Perhaps there are," Myra said. "Don't. I don't want that. I shouldn't like that. I want everything in here to be real.
Are you real? I must believe you are.
Of course I'm real.
She was now thoroughly puzzled. And it makes a difference, doesn't it? It's very important that you and everything else should be real. Everything in the sphere. But tell me, whatever's arranging these happenings must be pretty powerful if it can fool our instruments and our senses so completely and consistently, and yet it can't do anything we recognize as strange, that is, inside this puny little steel skin. Why not?
Presumably it has its limitations. We should be pleased.
Yes, all right, next point. You remember the time I tried to sit up in the lounge after midnight and stay awake?
That was silly. Nobody can stay awake after midnight. Standing orders were quite clear on that point.
Yes, they were, weren't they? Bruno seemed to be trying to grin. Do you remember my telling you how I couldn't account for being in my own bed as usual when the music woke us? You remember the big music? And this is what I'm really after. Do you remember how we all agreed at breakfast that life in space must have conditioned us in such a way that falling asleep at a fixed time had become an automatic mechanism? You remember that?
Naturally I do.
Right. 2 questions then. Does that strike you as a likely explanation? That sort of complete self-conditioning in all 4 of us after just a number of months?
Not when you put it like that.
But we all agreed on it, didn't we? Without hesitation.
Mara, leaning against a side wall, fidgeted. He was being not pleasant in a new way, one that made her want to stop him talking even while he was thinking at his best. "What's your other question, Bruno?" Her voice sounded unusual to her.
Ah, you're feeling it too, are you?
I don't know what you mean.
I think you will in a minute. Try my other question. The night of the music was a long time ago, soon after we arrived here, but you remember it clearly, so do I. And yet, when I try to remember what I was doing only a couple of months earlier, on Earth, finishing up my life there, getting ready for this, it's just a vague blur. Nothing stands out.
It's all so remote.
Maybe, but I remember the trip clearly enough, don't you?
Mara caught her breath. I feel surprised, she told herself, or something like that. I feel the way Bruno looked when he left the lunch table. She said nothing.
You're feeling it now, all right, aren't you?
He was watching her closely with his narrow eyes.
Let me try to describe it. A surprise that goes on and on, puzzlement, symptoms of physical exertion or strain, and above all, a sort of discomfort. Only in the mind, like having a sharp object pressed against a tender part of your body, except that this is in your mind.
What are you talking about?
A difficulty of vocabulary. The loudspeaker above the door clicked on, and Clovis's voice said,
"Attention! Strange happening! Assemble in the lounge at once! Strange happening!"
Mara and Bruno stopped staring at each other and hurried out along the narrow corridor. Clovis and Leah were already in the lounge, looking out of the port. Apparently only a few feet beyond the steel-hard glass and illuminated from some invisible source were 2 floating figures. The detail was excellent, and the 4 inside the sphere could distinguish without difficulty every fold in the naked skin of the 2 caricatures of humanity presented, it seemed, for their thorough inspection, a presumption given added weight by the slow rotation of the pair that enabled their every portion to be scrutinized. Except for a scrubby growth at the base of the skull, they were hairless. The limbs were foreshortened, lacking the normal narrowing at the joints, and the bellies protuberant. One had male characteristics, the other female, yet in neither case were these complete. From each open, wet, quivering, toothless mouth there came a loud, clearly audible yelling, higher in pitch than any those in the sphere could have produced, and of an unfamiliar emotional range. "Well, I wonder how long this will last," Clovis said.
"Is it worth trying the repellers on them?" Leah asked. "What does the radar say? Does it see them?"
"I'll go and have a look." Bruno turned his back on the port. "I don't like them."
"Why not?"
Mara saw he was sweating again. "They remind me of something."
"What?"
I'm trying to think." But although Bruno went on trying to think for the rest of that day, with such obvious seriousness that even Clovis did his best to help with suggestions, he was no nearer a solution when they parted, as was their habit, at 5 minutes to midnight. And when, several times in the next couple of days, Mara mentioned the afternoon of the caricatures to him, he showed little interest. "Bruno, you are extraordinary," she said one evening. "What happened to those odd feelings of yours you were so eager to describe to me just before Clovis called us into the lounge?" He shrugged his narrow shoulders in the almost girlish way he had. "Oh, I don't know what could have got into me," he said. "I expect I was just angry with the confounded analyzer and the way it kept breaking down. It's been much better recently." "And all that thinking you used to do?" "That was a complete waste of time." "Surely not." "Yes, I agree with Clovis. Let Base do all the thinking." Mara was disappointed. To hear Bruno resigning the task of thought seemed like the end of something. This feeling was powerfully underlined for her when, a little later, the announcement came over the loudspeaker in the lounge. Without any preamble at all, other than the usual click-on, a strange voice said, "Your attention, please. This is Base calling over your intercom." They all looked up in great surprise, especially Clovis, who said quickly to Bruno, "Is that possible?" "Oh yes, they've been experimenting," Bruno replied as quickly. "It is perhaps ironical," the voice went on, "that the first transmission we have been able to make to you by the present means is also the last you will receive by any. For some time, the maintenance of space stations has been uneconomic, and the decision has just been taken to discontinue them altogether. You will therefore make no further reports of any kind, or rather, you may of course continue to do on the understanding that nobody will be listening. In many cases, it has fortunately been found possible to arrange for the collection of station staffs and their return to Earth. In others, those involving a journey to the remoter parts of the galaxy, a prohibitive expenditure of time and effort would be entailed. I am sorry to have to tell you that your own station is one of these. Accordingly, you will never be relieved. All of us here are confident that you will respond to this new situation with dignity and resource. Before we sever communication for the last time, I have one more point to make. It involves a revelation which may prove so unwelcome that only with the greatest reluctance can I bring myself to utter it. My colleagues, however, insisted that those in your predicament deserve, in your own interests, to hear the whole truth about it. I must tell you then that contrary to your earlier information, we have had no reports from any other station whose content resembles in the slightest degree your accounts of the strange happenings you claim to have witnessed. The deception was considered necessary so that your morale might be maintained, but the time for deceptions is over. You are unique, and in the variety of mankind, that is no small distinction. Be proud of it. Goodbye forever." They sat without speaking until 5 minutes to midnight. Try as she would, Myra found it impossible to conceive their future, and the next morning she had no more success. That was as long as any of them had leisure to come to terms with their permanent isolation, for by midday a quite new phase of strange happenings had begun. Marai and Leah were preparing lunch in the kitchen when Myra, opening the cupboard where the dishes were kept, was confronted by a flattish reddish creature with many legs and a pair of unequally sized pincers. She gave a gasp, almost a shriek of astonishment. "What is it?" Leah said, hurrying over, and then in a high voice, "Is it alive?" "It's moving. Call the men." Until the others came, Mara simply stared. She found her lower lip shaking in a curious way. Inside now, she kept thinking. Not just outside. Inside.
"Let's have a look," Clovis said. "I see. Pass me a knife or something." He rapped at the creature, making a dry, bony sound. "Well, it works for tactile and oral, as well as visual anyway. A thorough illusion, if it is one." "It must be," Bruno said. "Don't you recognize it?" "There is something familiar about it, I suppose." "You suppose? You mean you don't know a crab when you see one?" "Oh, of course." Clovis looked slightly sheepish. "I remember now. A terrestrial animal, isn't it? Lives in the water. And so it must be an illusion. Crabs don't cross space as far as I know. And even if they could, they'd have a tough time carving their way through the skin of the sphere." His sensible manner and tone helped Mara to get over her astonishment, and it was she who suggested that the crab be disposed of down the waste chute. At lunch, she said, "It was a remarkably specific illusion, don't you think? I wonder how it was projected." "No point in wondering about that," Bruno told her. "How can we ever know? And what use would the knowledge be to us if we did know?" "Knowing the truth has its own value." "I don't understand you." Leah came in with the coffee just then. "The crab's back," she said. "Or there's another one there, I can't tell." More crabs, or simulacra thereof, appeared at intervals for the rest of the day, 11 of them in all. It seemed, as Clovis put it, that the illusion-producing technique had its limitations, inasmuch as none of them saw a crab actually materialize. The new arrival would be discovered, under a bed or behind a bank of apparatus. On the other hand, the depth of illusion produced was very great, as they all agreed, when Mara, putting the 8th crab down the chute, was nipped in the finger, suffered pain, and exuded a few drops of blood. "Another new departure," Clovis said. "An illusory physical process brought about on the actual person of one of us. They're improving." Next morning there were insects. The main apparatus room was found to be infested with what, again on Bruno's prompting, they recognized as cockroaches. By lunchtime there were moths and flying beetles in all the main rooms, and a number of large flies became noticeable towards the evening. The whole of their attention became concentrated upon avoiding these creatures as far as possible. The day passed without Clovis asking Mara to go with him. This had never happened before. The following afternoon a fresh problem was raised by Leah's announcement that the garden now contained no fruits or vegetables, none at any rate that were accessible to her senses. In this the other three concurred. Clovis put the feelings of all of them when he said, "If this is an illusion, it's as efficient as the reality, because fruits and vegetables you can never find are the same as no fruits and vegetables." The evening meal used up all the food they had. Soon after 2 o'clock in the morning, Mara was aroused by Clovis's voice saying over the loudspeaker, "Attention, everyone! Strange happening! Assemble in the lounge immediately." She was still on her way when she became aware of a new quality in the background of silence she had grown used to. It was a deeper silence, as if some sound at the very threshold of audibility had ceased. There were unfamiliar vibrations underfoot. Clovis was standing by the port, gazing through it with interest. "Look at this, Myra," he said. At a distance impossible to gauge, an oblong of light had become visible, a degree or so in breadth and perhaps 2½ times as high. The light was of comparable quality to that illuminating the inside of the sphere. Now and then it flickered. "What is it?" Mara asked. "I don't know. It's only just appeared." The floor beneath them shuddered violently. "That was what woke me, one of those tremors. Ah, here you are, Bruno. What do you make of it?" Bruno's large eyes widened further, but he said nothing. A moment later Leah arrived and joined the silent group by the port. Another vibration shook the sphere. Some vessel in the kitchen fell to the floor and smashed. Then Mara said, "I can see what looks like a flight of steps leading down from the lower edge of the light. 3 or 4 of them, perhaps more." She had barely finished speaking when a shadow appeared before them, cast by the rectangle of light onto a surface none of them could identify. The shadow seemed to them of a stupefying vastness, but it was beyond question that of a man. A moment later the man came into view, outlined by the light, and descended the steps,
Another moment or two, and he was evidently a few feet from the port, looking in on them, their own lights bright on the upper half of him. He was a well-built man, wearing a grey uniform jacket and a metal helmet. An object, recognizable as a gun of some sort, was slung over his shoulder. While he watched them, two other figures, similarly accoutred, came down the steps and joined him. There was a brief interval. Then he moved out of view to their right, doing so with the demeanour of one walking on a level surface. None of the four inside spoke or moved, not even at the sound of heavy bolts being drawn in the section of outer wall directly in front of them, not even when that entire section swung away from them like a door opening outwards and the three men stepped through into the sphere. Two of them had unslung the guns from their shoulders. Mara remembered an occasion, weeks ago, when she had risen from a stooping position in the kitchen and struck her head violently on the bottom edge of a cupboard door Leah had happened to leave open. The feeling Mara now experienced was similar, except that she had no particular physical sensations. Another memory, a much fainter one, passed across the far background of her mind. Somebody had once tried to explain to her the likeness between a certain mental state and the bodily sensation of discomfort, and she had not understood. The memory faded sharply. The man they had first seen said, "All roll up your sleeves." Clovis looked at him with less curiosity than he had been showing when Mara first joined him at the port a few minutes earlier. "You're an illusion," he said. "No, I'm not. Roll up your sleeves, all of you." He watched them closely while they obeyed, becoming impatient at the slowness with which they moved. The other man, whose gun was unslung, a younger man, said, "Don't be hard on them, Alan. We've no idea what they've been through." "I'm not taking any chances," Alan said. "Not after that crowd in the trees. Now this is for your own good," he went on, addressing the four. "Keep quite still. All right, Douglas." The third man came forward, holding what Mara knew to be a hypodermic syringe. He took her firmly by her bare arm and gave her an injection. At once her feelings altered, in the sense that, although there was still discomfort in her mind, neither this nor anything else seemed to matter. After a time she heard the young man say, "You can roll your sleeves down now. You can be quite sure that nothing bad will happen to you." "Come with us," Alan said. Mara and the others followed the three men out of the sphere, across a gritty floor that might have been concrete, and up the steps, a distance of perhaps 30 feet. They entered a corridor with artificial lighting, and then a room into which the sun was streaming. There were 20 or 30 people in the room, some of them wearing the grey uniform. Now and then the walls shook as the sphere had done, but to the accompaniment of distant explosions. A faint shouting could also be heard from time to time. Alan's voice said loudly, "Let's try and get a bit of order going. Douglas, they'll be wanting you to deal with the people in the tank. They've been conditioned to believe they're congenitally aquatic, so you better give them a shot that'll knock them out straight away. Holmes is draining the tank now. Off you go. Now you, James, you watch this lot, while I find out some more about them. I wish those psycho chaps would turn up. We're just working in the dark." His voice moved further away. "Sergeant, get these 5 out of here." "Where to, sir?" "I don't mind where, just out of here. And watch them." "They've all been given shots, sir." "I know. But look at them. They're not human anymore, and it's no use talking to them. They've been deprived of language. That's how they got the way they are. Now get them out right away." Mara looked slowly at the young man who stood near them, James. "Where are we?" she asked. James hesitated. "I was ordered to tell you nothing," he said. "You're supposed to wait for the psychological team to get to you and treat you." "Please?" "All right. This much can't hurt you, I suppose. You 4 and a number of other groups have been the subject of various experiments. This building is part of Special Welfare Research Station No. 4, or rather it was. The government that set it up no longer exists. It has been removed by the Revolutionary Army, of which I'm a member. We had to shoot our way in here, and there's fighting still going on." "Then we weren't in space at all?" "No."
Why did they make us believe we were?
We don't know yet.
And how did they do it?
Some new form of deep-level hypnosis, it seems, probably renewed at regular intervals, plus various apparatus for producing illusions. We're still working on that. Now, I think that's enough questions for the moment. The best thing you can do is sit down and rest.
Thank you. What's hypnosis?
Oh, of course. They'd have removed knowledge of that. It'll all be explained to you later. James, come and have a look at this, will you? Alan's voice called. I can't make much of it. Myra followed James a little way. Among the clamour of voices, some speaking languages unfamiliar to her, others speaking none, she heard James ask, "Is this the right file? Fear elimination?" "Must be," Alan answered. "Here's the last entry. Removal of Bruno 5 and substitution of Bruno 6 accomplished, together with memory adjustment of other 3 subjects. Memo to Preparation Center. Avoid repetition of Bruno 5 personality type with strong curiosity drives. Started catching on to the setup, eh? Wonder what they did with him."
"There's that psycho hospital across the way they're still investigating. Perhaps he's in there."
"With Bruno's 1 to 4, no doubt. Never mind that for the moment. Now, procedures, penultimate phase. Removal of all ultimate confidence. Severance of communication. Total denial of prospective change. Inculcation of uniqueness syndrome. Environment shown to be violable. Unknowable crisis in prospect. Food deprivation. I can understand that last bit. They don't look starved, though.
Perhaps they've only just started them on it."
"We'll get them fed in a minute. Well, all this still beats me, James. Reactions. Little change. Responses poor. Accelerating impoverishment of emotional life and its vocabulary. Compare portion of novel written by Myra 7 with contributions of predecessors. Prognosis: further affective deterioration, catatonic apathy, failure of experiment. That's a comfort anyway. But what has all this got to do with fear elimination?"
They stopped talking suddenly, and Myra followed the direction of their gaze. A door had been opened, and the man called Douglas was supervising the entry of a number of others, each supporting or carrying a human form wrapped in a blanket.
"This must be the lot from the tank,"
Alan or James said. Myra watched while those in the blankets were made as comfortable as possible on benches or on the floor. One of them, however, remained totally wrapped in his blanket and was paid no attention.
"He's had it, has he?"
"Shock, I'm afraid." Douglas's voice was unsteady. "There was nothing we could do. Perhaps we shouldn't have—" Myra stooped and turned back the edge of the blanket. What she saw was much stranger than anything she had experienced in the sphere. "What's the matter with him?" she asked James.
"Matter with him? You can die of shock, you know."
"I can do what?" Myra, staring at James, was aware that his face had become distorted by a mixture of expressions. One of them was understanding. All the others were painful to look at. They were renderings of what she herself was feeling. Her vision darkened, and she ran from the room, back the way they had come, down the steps, across the floor, back into the sphere. James was unfamiliar with the arrangement of the rooms there, and did not reach her until she had picked up the manuscript of the novel, hugged it to her chest with crossed arms, and fallen onto her bed, her knees drawn up as far as they would go, her head lowered as it had been before her birth, an event of which she knew nothing. She was still in the same position when, days later, somebody sat heavily down beside her. "Myra, you must know who this is. Open your eyes, Myra. Come out of there." After he had said this in the same gentle voice some hundreds of times, she did open her eyes a little. She was in a long, high room, and near her was a fat man with a pale skin. He reminded her of something to do with space and thinking. She screwed her eyes shut. "Myra, I know you remember me. Open your eyes again." She kept them shut while he went on talking. Open your eyes. Straighten your body.
She did not move.
Straighten your body, Myra. I love you.
Slowly her feet crept down the bed, and her head lifted. This concludes the reading of My Enemy's Enemy by Kingsley Amis. This book was read by Richard Green.